Welcome, everyone, to podcast 4 of 4 in our series about leading change for OASIS E. Number 1 was on accountability, number 2 was on conflict resolution, number 3 on complaint management, and finally, we got to my favorite one, which is positive culture. Um, with us today is Dr. Tanya Miller of TYM Coaching and Cindy Kraft and Sherry Teague from K&K Healthcare Solutions. Cindy, do you have a story or an example that we can start off with?
Well, when you talk about OASIS, positive is usually not a word that comes anywhere near the top of the list when it comes to that conversation. From an educator standpoint, when we were back to seeing everybody in person doing education, people physically didn't look happy to be there. My running joke for the better part of a decade has been they look like they're going to the dentist without any sort of pain medication. They're there against their will. They're being made to do this. Or, you look at the review process, and the review process tends to very much focus on when mistakes are made or you didn't do it right. And I've known more than the occasional clinician who has just embraced the if I turn it in and I don't hear anything, no news is my validation. I prefer not to hear from them because I know that number on caller ID, and they're basically going to tell me when something is wrong. And I think that negative culture isn't necessarily intentional on the part of the organization. I think that some leaders, and I would put myself in this category, can get very task oriented about the work that needs to be done and focus on essentially what is on fire now. And so here's our biggest issue. We need to work on this. We work on it. We get it taken care of. Yes, it's better than we started, but then we go immediately to what's the next thing on the list? What is the thing I have to fix now or deal with now or manage now? And don't necessarily take time to acknowledge success, to reinforce what does work. And I think leaders hear so much of, and if you think about the 3 previous topics, Sherry, those could be very much seen as a negative slant. And we did our best to show that the 3 of them are not. But I think sometimes leaders can get so caught up in a task that they don't acknowledge what is working in the organization, what the mistakes that are not being made with OASIS, the individuals that very rarely need corrections. I don't necessarily see that kind of reinforcement. Now, I know, Sherry, you're on the other end of that conversation. You are one of the most positive human beings I have ever met. So when I watch your leadership style, it's definitely different.
Yeah, I've been called toxically positive in the past, and I take that and I wear that badge of honor proudly. I as an agency owner, I think that we always tried to manage the message in a way that it was going to be accepted in a positive light, even if it was a negative subject. And I know that in the South, dress codes always become an issue in home health agencies, particularly around the heat that we have to deal with in homes and doing home care. And we needed to deliver that message to our staff because we had gotten some feedback from some folks in the community and other folks in the agency that people were starting to get a little lax on the dress code. So we, instead of gathering at our staff meeting and having that conversation and saying, "Here's our dress code, you must do this," which we learned in accountability is not a great way to lead. We decided to inject some fun, and we had all of our managers dress up in all the dress code violations. They kind of all got together and decided who was going to wear the tank top showing too much cleavage and who was going to wear the ratty t-shirt, who was going to wear different things, all the way down to and including one of our staff managers who was a clinician who bent over and showed her thong out of the back of her pants, which was very unexpected, but obviously received with the humor that was intended, but then able to give that message that, hey guys, we still need to adhere to the dress code, and here's our dress code, because you don't want people to look at you the way that you looked at the managers as they walked in this morning. So it was a completely different way of managing that message. Tanya, can you speak to how you can create that positive culture and or build that positive culture around change in an agency?
Sure. So first of all, the 2 of you gave us a great example, and we didn't try to have different styles on the call, but we have very different styles on the call. And one of the things that's really important as managers is to know that people are different, but they're predictably different. And I like to use the DISC behavioral style in my leadership education, showing that we all have a blend of different styles of we engage in the workforce and in social situations, but we tend to have one style that's more common for us. And as leaders, we don't have to necessarily have big assessment tools and know all the things about our employees. Sure, that gives us amazing insight, but we can do just quick, subtle things and watch how people interact. So, for example, Cindy said something very specific. I like to get to the next task. I want to focus on these items. Cindy is very detail oriented. That's why she is amazing at telling you all about OASIS and letting you know what you need to do around the details, because she's incredible at that detail, very focused on that. So if you have employees that are really focused on the detail, talking to them about broad concepts or big ideas and not spending the time to share the detail with them might frustrate them and not give them that positive atmosphere. We talked, Sherry shares that she's very optimistic. She likes fun. If you take fun out of the environment, you're going to really disengage Sherry as an employee. So, keeping things lighthearted, taking time to spend time to have that conversation with Sherry about what fun stuff she did over the weekends or what's going on in her life is really going to matter to Sherry. And one of the really good things is that the majority of people that are attracted to healthcare tend to have a very similar style. So the majority of your team members will have an S behavioral style, which is a style that likes things stable and steady and secure. They also don't quite care for change. That's a problem, because that's what we always have, is one change after another, and here comes another one, is OASIS. So how do we then make that positive attitude, a positive environment for that change for OASIS? And the best way to do that is to make sure that your team members participate in the process. S behavioral styles like to participate in the process. So just think about what your agency is doing right now. Do you have a small group of people in a room making decisions for everybody, and that you're going to implement it and send it down the pike, and everybody's just going to have to deal with that change? That's not how you want to approach this. Bring your team members in, whether it's virtually or in person. Bring them in, give them guidance about how things have to move along, and ask them, how would you approach this? What do we need to know from the team? What do we need to know from the frontline team members? Getting that engagement and then showing to them that you truly appreciate their feedback and their participation is really going to engage your team members. So just think about those little styles and how people approach things differently.
And as an extrovert, Tanya, we've talked about this at length. When I was working with folks that weren't necessarily extroverted, they were introverted, or somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. Sometimes your extroverts, and myself included, I'm speaking of myself, will blow over the introverts, and will make the introverts feel a little marginalized. And so it's really important that not just that you understand what your staff's personalities are, and that you understand what's going to go over to the biggest lot of them, and then but reach the ones on the edge as well, using their particular styles. You also want to understand how the other ones operate. There's a lot that we go back to that Stephen Covey thing, having that empathy and seeking first to understand that your personality as a leader might be boisterous and fun and loud and all those things, and that you may be shutting off some of your staff who don't have those types of personalities. So if you could speak to that a little bit, I'd really
Sure.
appreciate it.
So I'm going to get Cindy's feedback here, because I'm going to say one word and see what she says in this. Brainstorming session. Ugh.
I was about to talk about that, Tanya, because I saw some articles recently about shifting a bit from the put everybody in a room and brainstorm to more of a generate your ideas ahead and then bring it in for a collaborative discussion. Because I know my personality, that pushed into a room and here's a question you just asked me and let's come up with ideas. I need a minute. I need to process that. I need to think about, what I want to say. And I think sometimes that silence is misinterpreted as you're not engaged, you're not participating, you don't have ideas, when it's sometimes the balance of, if we want to do a brainstorming session, but provide the topic ahead for those who want to be able to be prepared. And then others are going to come not prepared. and come up with ideas off the top of their head. Yes, Sherry, I mean Sherry. And they will be tremendous ideas, but she doesn't need that lead time. I do. And so I think some of that engagement piece is not, to overcomplicate it with knowing your team, but I think the one size fits all solution, especially connecting it to how we've approached OASIS in the past, doesn't necessarily get us to where we want to be.
Absolutely. And you reminded me of a great story. I had this amazing nurse manager who had brilliant ideas and never shared them. She was very much of an introvert. She was very quiet. Oftentimes, we were in a room of very dominant behavioral styles, like myself, who would talk a lot and suck all the air and energy out of the room, and she would sit quietly in the corner. And what I did to really engage that person was I gave her the questions ahead of time and I said, I know that you have great ideas and I want to hear them. Here is what we're going to talk about. I'm going to ask you these specific questions so that she was prepared. And then she felt comfortable being able to present that information in the meeting. And she added such incredible value to that meeting. And I would get feedback from other leaders and saying, wow, you're really teaching that person so much about home health and they really know the environment now. And I'm thinking they always knew the environment. They just never told you. So understanding to create that positive environment, that you have to give people a way to express themselves and engage in the organization differently. There isn't a one size fits all. And how you might like to be um, t- talked to and to be engaged in the organization might be so different than somebody else. So giving those different options and realizing that you need to meet people where they are based on their styles can be really powerful. And then you really create that positive environment.
Tanya, what are your thoughts on as agencies are now looking at the ability to bring clinicians back into the office for group type activities? What I'm hearing and seeing is some of the, well, we'll just put them all in a room and there we go. We have collaboration. We're going to rebuild the team by just putting them all physically back in a room. But some of what I'm observing is they're all in a room. Somebody's at the front of the room, talks to them for a designated amount of time, and then it's over and they all run out of the room to go do their visits and whatever else they need to do. What do you have any tips or thoughts on as agencies are looking at kind of how their teams work and how that group fits together that they might want to consider?
Sure. You want to remember three things. Your team needs three things: clear expectations, a place and a way to participate in the process, and sincere appreciation. So when you're bringing people into the room, first of all, you're interrupting their daily life because they have to come in, they have to rearrange their schedules, they have to fit it all in. Keep those three things in mind. Make sure you have clear expectations of what you're talking about that day. You clearly set your expectations for what's going on, and you give people a way to meaningfully participate. I'm going to say that again, meaningfully participate. Do not just have people raise their hand or vote on something. Have them actually give input that is going to produce something. So maybe that's some small group work or discussion that they bring back to the table, or maybe they help to build the process. Don't come with all the answers to the meeting. Let them help with that. And then show ways to sincerely appreciate that participation, whether it's, you know, reaching out to them personally. Here's my favorite, and I know this is mind blowing: thank you cards. They were my most powerful weapon as a leader. Every week, I wrote somebody a thank you note for something they did. You can always find something somebody did within your organization to thank them. Handwritten thank you notes are amazingly powerful. They hardly cost anything. And ironically, my handwriting is so bad that nobody can read my handwritten notes. And that made them even more special because they had to walk in to my office and say, can you decipher this and tell me what you're saying to me? So it gave me a chance to talk to them. So don't use the excuse that your handwriting is awful, because that doesn't cut it. It just gives you another way to engage people. So clear expectations, a way to meaningfully participate, and sincere appreciation. If you combine those things into your engagement with your team, you will create a positive environment.
Tanya, I think that's such sage advice. And I just want to remind folks that sometimes building a culture feels like it gets in the way of your everyday activities. Don't let it do that. Your culture is so crucial. So ask yourself on Monday morning, what am I going to do to promote our culture this week? Or ask yourself on Friday, conversely, what did I do this week to promote culture? And that way you always keep it at the front of your mind, putting, a reminder on your desk or something like that. I just cannot iterate any more positively what Tanya just said about what people are looking for. In every salary survey and every employment survey on the books, it's not about the money, folks. And as hard as that is to believe, it is really about the culture and their inclusivity into the agency, and their belief and their trust in their leaders and things like that. So that concludes our fourth webinar on positive change and positivity and change. And if you guys want to, go to the YouTube channel and find the other three and listen to them in your car, listen to them at your desk, and just take this as a way of us meaningfully wanting to give you some advice as you navigate this change into OASIS E. If you want any more information on team building and on culture and inclusivity in your agency, please reach out to Dr. Miller at tymcoaching.com. You will not regret reaching out to Dr. Miller. And if you have any needs for education, audits, consulting in the home health space, reach out to Cindy Kraft or Sherry Teague at www.valuebeyondthevisit. Thank you so much for listening. Have a nice day.